Welcome back to the Arbitrage.Run show. I'm your host, Donkey Teeth, joined, as always, by the star, Kevin. Arbitrage Racing. What's happening, brother?
Hey, Donkey. Doing good?
Doing great. Lending kicked off in the past week. We've been lending out some fun horses. I've gotten a lot of messages from people. They're having fun racing some of our horses. And we lent out Evergreen Gates twice accidentally.
Yeah, that was an adventure trying to reclaim it. I don't know why you can't auto reclaim like after it's lent out, but you basically have to snipe your own horse out of it. So we lost out, but just means somebody else gets them for 4 days. So sorry.
Yeah, well, we were hoping that if that did happen, a smaller stable would have gotten her, but Inferno got Evergreen now, so just another one of the biggest stables. But what can you do? It's part of the game.
Yeah, roll the dice. But I mean, it was cool the first time where I think somebody won it, or I guess it popped up, and they had mentioned earlier in the day that their account had gotten hacked and they were about to give up on ZED for a bit, and then Evergreen just falls into their lending barn, and they had a good 4 days with her.
That's kind of like when you have a terrible round of golf and you get to the 18th hole and then you chip in for birdie.
That's right.
Keeps you coming
back, right?
Maybe not quite like that. I mean, terrible getting your horses stolen.
Yeah.
But yeah, be careful out there, people. Don't click any links.
Yep. But yeah, shout out to Derek from, I think D-Rex was his name. So shout out to him. He won the first 4 days of Evergreen's lending.
We're going to do a spin of the wheel a little bit later in the show, and we're going to announce when that horse goes into lending. But there's going to be 6 horses on our wheel that we're going to spin, and I'm looking forward to that. We've got some more fun ones as options for people to spin for here. And but actually, we've got another chance for our viewers to win something this week, and that's going to be from Lucky Jack, he's starting up. Actually, him and I think it's Dan Chan that's hosting them on the ZED site. They've got some fun stuff going on over there, Kevin. A lot of different formats that they're launching, and he asked us to mention them. We'll pull up the rules really quick and give a rundown. But so we're recording this on Thursday, September 8th. And that's US time, I suppose. You always got to say that. But the first Lucky Brawl, the registration will close for that tonight. So if you're listening to this later, you may not have a chance at that. But there's another event called the Goblin Rush, and we'll give a quick rundown on these just to let people know what's going on with them. But it's cool that the community is creating all of this kind of stuff. It's the kind of stuff that we hope ZED itself evolves into. But ZED is kind of, they're handcuffed a little bit with how quickly they're able to evolve because everything's on the blockchain, and they got the class system that we're working on. They're working on all that other stuff. So it's awesome that the community is able to create this kind of stuff, isn't it, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good partnership where you have LJ, Dan Chan, and then ZED at least able to kind of do the custom races on the site, which always adds that extra layer of kind of being more official feeling. But yeah, a lot of fun for Friday night with the Goblins, and then the Lucky Brawl. Looks like it might be weekly, at least for these first 2 weeks. But what I really like about the Lucky Brawl is you can segment it by bloodline, which I think ZED's finally getting to in their custom races. But you get a cheaper buy-in for Buterin than you would Nakamoto. You get to pick your funnel, which is always nice, and get a kind of a mini grand final format racing at 1,000, 12, 14 for sprinters. And then if you win, you get to advance to a grand final as well. So there's just a lot of potential upside if you keep winning, and a lot of fun racing against horses of your own blood type.
Right. One of my friends, and I keep mentioning this on the shows, but I got a lot of friends that I've gotten into ZED, and some of them have taken breaks just because it hasn't been that much fun with the growing pains that we've gone through the past couple of months. But a lot of them are getting back into it and have listened to the show, and people are curious, well, what's the Lucky Maiden? And I think that this is kind of a good segue to that, because the 6th Lucky Maiden is going to be coming up in a couple more weeks. It's once a month. And that one is another event that Lucky Jack hosts. And or has created and runs, and it's hosted on the Zombie Racing site. So we've got all these different private sites that are actually trustworthy. You can trust them to put your money in, and at least thus far they've been paying it out. I mean, we don't want to go to bat too strong for anybody. No, these guys are trustworthy. Lucky Jack has been in Zed for, she's probably like 7 years or something like that. So what happens here, you go on to OpenSea and they're selling tokens for these events. So this Lucky Brawl in particular, I've got it pulled up here. There's a different price point for each bloodline, and you'll select the funnel that your horse is going to race in. So if you've got, let's say Y2K is a Nakamoto Sprinter, we would buy the $75 token and we'd be entered into that 12 horse race. And if we win that, we advance on to the grand final with the winners of all the 11 other races. I think I've got that right, Kevin?
Sounds about right. Yep. And then there's some other like fun little bonus things that LJ is really good at doing. I think they have this like poker element where depending on what place you get some kind of card value, and then you can create a poker hand based off your 3 finishes. So if you go like first, I think first place is an ace, so you'd have 3 of a kind aces. It's just a fun little twist, and they give out a bonus for the best poker hand following it.
Yeah, we'll link this in the description to the show over on YouTube. So we'll put the rules for the Lucky Brawl, and here we've got the Goblin Rush as well. And the goblins can come into play in the Lucky Brawl as well. If you don't get to 12 horses in your bloodline distance funnel, then Lucky Jack's goblins will be entered in to fill those races. And those are Z268s that are fillers. But in the Goblin Rush event, that's a $50 entry fee, and I believe you buy tokens for those as well. And then you will go against the goblins, and it's whoever is able to last the longest ends up winning the pot, or something along those lines, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because that one you want like a well-rounded horse because you're racing across all funnels, but you just have to be a Z268. But if you have a variance horse, you're gonna probably roll that wrong side of variance at some point and get eliminated. So it's an interesting little balance. But yeah, I like the variety, give people things to do rather than just grinding these Zed tournaments or just paid racing. This is a lot of fun. You can take Friday night, spend $50 and maybe make a lot of money out of it.
Hopefully. So we're going to have tokens. We won't be able to raffle one off for the first Lucky Brawl here, but assuming, these races fill to at least a reasonable degree, Lucky Jack will be hosting it again next week. Each Friday, they run Friday and Saturday, I believe it is. And again, Zed is setting up these custom races. And the Goblin Rush is Friday and Saturday night as well. So these are going to be weekly things. Leave your wallet address in the replies or the comments on the YouTube video, and we will raffle off tokens to anybody that left a comment on this video. Subscribe and like the video as well. We'd appreciate that. But we will continue moving on here with the show, Kevin. So first Twitter question this week, Kevin, is coming from Samplegate Stable. And Samplegate's actually coincidentally is should mention, Lucky Jack is running a stream on Twitch for those events. And Samplegates is on those streams. His Twitch is LuckyJack77. So go check that out if you enter those events and make sure you catch the stream. They put on a good show, but Samplegates will be on there. Chop, I think, from Samplegates. And this question is coming from him, was the most liked question on Twitter this week. How many times do you breed a horse before determining whether it breeds well or poorly? And do we have some sort of methodology for finding that out? Kevin, I'll take the first crack here because this is a good question. It's a tough one. People are they're not giving us these layup questions here. There's always qualifiers, right? And first qualifier, not financial advice. Second qualifier depends on what you're doing with your stable, what your budget is. Third qualifier, it depends on each individual horse. So, not trying to give a like fuzzy answer here, but those are real things you have to consider. There's a lot of variables to consider with a question like this. So if you've got a female that's coming from really good bloodlines and maybe isn't that great of a racer, you're going to try to you're going to still breed it out no matter what. It just depends how much you're going to spend on that colt. the stallion the stud that you're breeding it with. Where it becomes fuzzier is I think we're not giving a whole lot of leash to a horse that is a mediocre racer and comes from mediocre lineages. Right now, there's just not really a place for those offspring to race unless you're targeting specific segmented racing and conditionals and looking at cross races and pacer races, and you can breed that out for like $10-20 whatever in house. All of these variables come into this question, so it's hard to give a strong answer on it. But I guess if you're asking whether it's a good breeder or not, I think we need a lot more sample. If you're talking about a female that's right now, it could only have what 6 or 7 offspring, maybe. Even that is not a meaningful sample unless you've done like the same stallion and it's a really good stallion over and over again. But even then, right? It's like maybe it needs something with more variance, and you've been using too stable of a horse. So it's really early to say. And it, again, comes back to what your own risk preference is and how much you want to put in and what you're doing with your stable, right?
Yeah, I think it's easier to tell the ones that have it compared to the ones that do not. Like the ones that don't, maybe it's just wishful thinking, but yeah, the sample is not huge. We don't know what the hit rate is on these types of things. I would define like a hit as getting close to the ability of like a really good racer that's breeding, or if you're exceeding the ability of someone who's maybe an average racer. If you're breeding above and you're constantly exceeding that horse's racing ability, I think it's got some breeding talent. It's pretty apparent certain horses can do it, even in a sample of 6, right? If you have 4 or so hits out of 6 and the average is like 1, you're starting to get to like a significant deviation from the mean at that point. So I think it's easier to tell the ones that have it. I wouldn't give up on the ones that have had a bunch of duds. What you could do is just be a little more selective in what you're breeding, or dial back your target. Like maybe look at Buterins, for example. Like just focus on those, and they have a much lower minimum in the stud, so you're not wasting a lot of money figuring out you have a bad breeder. It is easier if you have a stallion because you get 3x the sample every month. So it's a little easier to tell when if you go 0 for 18 in these first 6 months, odds are you don't have a very good breeding stallion. So it might be a little more definitive at that point, but just look at the match, see if it was a good match. If it wasn't a good match, I would almost just throw it out and focus on that smaller sample and just see what the hit rate is and go from there. But I wouldn't give up on the poorly breeding females just yet.
Right. I think a lot of it comes back to the class system that we're dealing with here, because a bad breeder today might not be a bad breeder in a couple months if we've got a properly segmented racing. There's just not a whole lot of room for error. It's really hard to be profitable in the current environment. So it's tough. It's tough because we're looking at a moving target. We're looking at all these different variables. We're looking at people in different situations with their stable, moving towards different goals and all of that. But I think there's an argument to breed out all horses, because you can find cheap studs, and you can use in-house breeding to get really cheap Buterin elites or crosses or whatever. And it's basically like $10 for an entry into one of these tournaments, and then you get to keep the horse too, and maybe you win and it pays itself off 20 times, right?
Yeah, that's why I think it's important to index like success on a different measure than just being successful in the current environment. That's why I like to index it on what is it producing relative to the ability it has on the track. And you can at least have that as a constant rather than a moving target that ZED is providing as valuable.
Right. And in our Keeping It Real section, I don't know if you saw this in the notes, Kevin, but we're going to go over a couple of horses. So we've done the same breed 4 times now. And the first one was awesome. The second one was still good. The third and fourth ones, which we ran recently, not so good. So it kind of goes to show you, like you need a large sample if you're looking at females, and even great pairings that have turned out great. They're going to be hit or miss down the line at times. So we'll get to that, but let's dive in on the next Twitter question here, Kevin. And this is one from a couple weeks back that we said we would get back around to, from Jack. This is the answer Sunny Days questions show. And this question is about a horse that we bought, the Creation of Mortals. We paid 48 Ethereum for this horse. He said about 45 days ago, and he asked this question 2 weeks ago or something like that. So we're looking at probably 60 days ago that we purchased this horse. It was a little bit under the radar. It was under raced. It's a Z2 Genesis Nakamoto stallion. He wants to know what our strategy was with that acquisition, how it's panned out for us, and so far, how it's panned out relative to our expectations. Thoughts here, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a horse I had my eye on for a long time. It was unboxed around the same time that we brought out Milk Bar Mania. I think it was like Final Wave, this horse, and Milk Bar all came out around the same time of that first tournament. And it was one of the few that would take flames at that point from Milk Bar. So it caught my eye doing that. It was owned by someone who wasn't too active in the game. So it was one of those horses we wanted to have like a bid out there, just a line in the water. But it sounds like a lot of people were doing that as well. So that's how it caught our eye. And then the valuation was tough. I think it was more than we wanted to pay at the time. But these assets are so rare in terms of like that top tier, being a top 10 sprinter or whatever you would call it. They just don't come to market very often. So there was a couple other bidders at it, and they had diamond handed this thing, not playing the game for like 6 months. So they didn't really have a intent to sell, but we settled on 48, I think was our second biggest purchase ever, or at least around the same that we paid for Supreme Polarity. So a big purchase, absolutely. But I almost view it as more of a investment in ZED, because there's no amount of ROI this thing is going to generate where we're going to pay that back in the short term or even like the medium term. But if ZED makes it big and we have a top 5 or 10 Genesis sprinter, then that's going to look like a good price. I would say on the P&L, we entered it in that $5,000 race, which I think was like 3.2 Ethereum. So P&L is jacked up. It came in 7th. If it had run like 100th of a second faster, we'd be looking at a whole different story there. So I'm not too worried about it. If you filter that one out, I think we generated like 1.3, 1.4 in 2 months of racing, which seems about what I would expect. We were talking about it earlier. I think it had more upside when we bought it than it has shown. The comp now I think is around like a Stylish Criminal type, somewhere around Stylish Criminal Final Wave. But at the time we bought it, it legit could have been close to billions based off of what it had shown in the first 80 races before we bought it. So we didn't hit the upside, but you can't hit it every time. I think we're very happy having a top 5 or 10 sprinter. Definitely had to pay for it, and just more invested in ZED as a result. But I'm happy with it. It also, I know, fills a big breed or a big need on the breeding side. So you want to talk about that, Donkey?
Yeah, I mean, we were really excited to breed the Creation of Mortals out, and you're looking at a super stable horse, which gives you a lot of options to breed with. And I guess it's also worth mentioning we owned half of Common Pound, and I don't remember, it was right around the same time that we sold Common Pound for, I think it's public knowledge, 50 Ethereum. So it was kind of, we had some funds there, and we're not in the habit of taking our ZED exposure off the table. Really, we continue to reinvest in the game because we believe in it. So that's another thing here. It's like at the point that we've gotten to, where do you put the funds? You know, we're not looking to draw it out of the ecosystem. So this was the logical choice. And we, like you said, you had to think for this horse for a long time, and it had that upside where, a week later, this horse could have been worth 100 ETH had it reached that 99th percentile outcome, right?
Yeah, and I think if we're putting a value on it now, and like I knew everything I knew about it now, I think the price would be like 35 to 40 ETH rather than the 48. But it's a much more proven commodity at this point. And I guess this is where we plugged the ETH value at 1640, I think, at the time of this. So it's about roughly the same, I think, as when we bought this horse a couple months ago. But yeah, it's interesting. That's a good point about the reinvesting, because we've done that a few times, right? We, I think, sold Ebony Royal and got Supreme Polarity about the same time. So there's not a ton of assets at this level that go for sale. So if we're trying to reinvest, these are kind of the opportunities that come in front of you, as well as just the level fare I have with this horse.
Well, and to elaborate on that, Kevin, I mean, if you believe in Zed and in Zed executing their vision and where we think it's going and this growth of the user base, what better asset to have than something like the creation of mortals, or on that tier or even above it? There's only so many. And so when if you think about more like Southern Farms and Wagmies and Icebergs coming into this game, these people, if it continues to grow in that direction, they're going to want these horses, and the value is going to go up because they're so limited. I mean, you already only have 1,000 Genesis Nakamotos, and of those, how many are good racers? And then of those, how many are this tier racers? There's really only a handful. So, it's so hard to value these kind of things, and it's all based on supply and demand, and there's very limited supply, so the price can go up drastically. I mean, there's a lot of variables here, right?
Yeah, I think the macro environment, just in terms of Zed, it was a little hotter 2 months ago when we bought it compared to right now. So, I mean, it's cyclical, right? We've had these spells before, and then something new comes out and it gets hot again. So, I think the crypto space in general will likely do something similar. Not financial advice, but yeah, it's all about the macro environment as well.
Yeah, it's a good time to mention, because we want to make a habit of talking about the breeding market and the stud market on these shows, but it has picked up definitely. I mean, 2 weeks ago we mentioned it had cooled. We've been seeing quite a few more orders on Arbitrage.Run. Come give us an order over there, by the way. Check out our supply of we've got a lot of horses that we're not breeding out. So there's a lot of them that are getting ready to reset, that females that you could breed at a very friendly price. We want people to have fun in the game, and we want to share these horses that we may not be using. But we've seen an uptick there. The breeding market is still not what it was maybe a month ago, when it was very frothy and you couldn't throw a winning horse into stud anywhere near the minimum. Now you can sneak some through. Not everybody's watching that stud master like hawks. So it's good and bad. I think it was tough for a lot of small stables for a while. They only got a couple of good studs, and they're on a fixed budget, and they can't get them through stud, and they just want to breed their own horses, and every time you put them in, you got 10 people trying to snipe it. So, it's a double-edged sword, but the market has picked up a little bit. It's not back to where it was a month ago, but we're gaining steam, it seems, right?
Yep, I agree. And I think they've done some good things around the tournament scoring, just trying new things. They realized, I think, progressive wasn't what they had hoped it was, and they were fairly quick by Zed terms, at least, to axe that or put it on the back burner. Came out with some variant scoring, which I think they're going to continue to tweak, but it's at least a direct effort at tailoring towards that type of horse. And that's all you can ask, is just test things, listen to the audience. And I think they're doing a good job right now.
Right. And all of this, is intended more or less as band-aids until we get to more of the finished product of this new class system that has structured segmented racing involved in it. But let's go to the spin the wheel and do this week's lend of the week. All right, spin the wheel, Kevin. So our 6 choices this week, we've got Festus, we've got Marajo, we've got the publisher, we've got Ruling Legend, File Format, and 9 Lives. All right, which one of these, if you were going to borrow a horse right now, Kevin, which one would you want?
Man, I would say Festus, just because it's so fun to run. I mean, I know it's not set up for paid racing, but with the new variants format for the tournaments, that'd be a fun one, because it just use out of its mind. And then Mirajo would be another, with like the Buterin tournament coming and more variant stuff. Just a lot of fun things on the horizon for those two.
And we're going to be putting this into the lending pool tomorrow, which is Friday, September 9th at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Friday, September 9th, 11 a.m. Eastern time. This horse will go into the lending pool. So get your refresh on at that time. But let's click the button here.
Yeah, before you click, I'll say, because I know last time it's tough to tell when a horse has actually been like gobbled up by the somebody else doing the lending. I would say give it 10, 15 minutes. And at that point, it's probably just not your day. I don't want anybody spending an hour, 2 hours refreshing again, looking for it. But
so
that'd be my advice.
Yeah, I think there's 2 ways. I think you can go to ZLead, and their horse page on ZLead will show if it's been borrowed. And then I also think you can find the horse's the stable page. So if you went to Arbitrage Racing stable, you can see the horses that have been borrowed from Arbitrage there. So a couple ways, so you're not wasting too much time. But you ready for the click here, Kevin?
All right, let's do it.
Let's go. Oh, Marajo.
Those were my two.
Yeah, I think if it was one like 9 lives, which we threw in there just to separate the colors, we would have done a second one. But Marajo is a fun one. We're happy to put that one in the lending pool.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So last couple segments of the show here, Kevin. We want to. Oh, I've got to switch. We want to go over successful breed from this past week. All right, so successful breed of the week here, Kevin. I don't know how to say this name. Saint Jern, lover of ETH.
I was gonna say like Stern. So, I don't know. It's out of my wheelhouse, but great horse.
It is. It's fun. This is the first cycle that we bred Star Phantom, and Star Phantom is our now stallion that we bred from Phantom Pacer and Star Strider. We rented Star Strider out for this. This was an expensive breed. We thought it was a terrible horse at first. Turned out to be really good. That's goes to show you keep running your horses. But we threw this horse. Actually, so this was booked. This was a booked stud for 0.3 ETH. Pretty fair price. I mean, I think we could probably stud Star Phantom out a little bit higher if we wanted to. But we booked 2 of them. So we gave 2 of these breeds away on Star Phantom, 2 covers for 0.3. And then we took one ourselves. So this one turned out pretty well, huh, Kevin?
Yeah, it's a good looking horse. It's been, I mean, dominating paid races where I don't think any of those earnings are from tournaments. And anytime thinking that horse is like a week old, maybe a little more than a week, and it's made like 0.18 off paid racing in that amount of time is a great start. Flaming almost every time in that mid range. It really looks a lot like the dad Star Phantom, where it's got a little bit of that like extended L, I would call it, not exactly a U. And I would expect this horse to make some noise in C1 as well with that amount of win equity and podium equity. I bet it'll flame in some of the lower dollar C1s.
Yeah, it hasn't quite made it up there yet, which is kind of surprising. It doesn't have a whole lot of back end, does it?
It doesn't, but I think some of these might be some 6-horse racing where it might have some back end, but it's disguised as 4th, 5th right now. So we'll see. We'll see when it builds out. I still wish there was a filter to to look at that, but you got to do it more manually.
Props to Know Your Horses this week. I tried to pull up Haku and it was down. So know your horses. Don't call it a comeback. So again, the Ethereum price today is $1,640, and this was a 0.3 stud fee. What are your so your comp for this horse right now, Kevin? Star Phantom, pretty much. Do you have any other horses that you would compare it to?
I mean, that's the one that came to mind. It's still so early. It just looks a lot like that horse. Obviously, being an exclusive, also a male. I know they kind of have that price listed as like, I love this horse, but if you want to pay this, I won't be mad about it. But not a realistic market value. I think it's probably worth 2 to 3, 4 ETH if you find the right buyer right now, depending on like what comes of it. So based on what I see here, it's at least 2, probably 3. It's a really top-notch mid with great blood.
Would you sell it for 3 ETH if you owned it and somebody came?
I think I'd sell for 4. I would not sell for 3.
Gotcha. Cool. But yeah, pretty darn successful breed. Hopefully it continues on this path. So let's see, who did it lose flames to here in this? You think it's probably 1,800?
It's a 6-horse, right? I think it's just horses.
It was 6-horse.
Yeah. So it just has a little too much variance to hit that. I was looking at it earlier. I think most of those horses are just dominant with their consistency. You see their flame rates; they're all at 100%, but they just don't have the variance.
And go back and listen to last week's show where Kevin breaks that, or was it last week's show that you talked about no, I think it was two weeks ago. You talked about the flames and the 6-horse races and what they mean, what they don't mean, why they're a little bit wacky.
Yep.
Let's keep it real though, Kevin. So I mentioned this off the top, but we've done Triumph for Molly with Blue Bullet 4 times now. And the most recent ones are named Triumph for Months, and Triumph for Seconds. And so the first one was Triumph for Terms, which is one of the best elite marathoners in the game. Definitely the most stable, very consistent. I think we bred Triumph for Terms maybe 5 cycles ago, and it's got over 2 ETH in profit now. So this just goes to show you, I mean, this horse isn't terrible, but our expectations were very high for these two breeds based on the first two. The second one was Triumph for Engagement. So Triumph for Terms was the first one. It's the best. Triumph for Engagement was the second one. It's the second best. Then I think Triumph for Seconds was the third, and Triumph for Months was the fourth. So people came to us, they saw that first breed and they wanted to buy one of these offspring, and we were not in a rush to give one away until we saw if this pair could continue its luck together.
Dominance. Yeah.
Their dominance, right? So I think somebody offered us like 0.7 or 0.75 or something like that. And it just wasn't worth it for us to give that up until we saw if it was going to be super consistent. I think now our price would probably be a little bit lower now that we've seen 2 failed. But what do you think about these horses, Kevin? Is this just a good example of what the two sides of the spectrum, and the expected outcome for Triumph for Mali and Blue Bullet is probably somewhere in between all of these 4?
Yeah, I mean, you've got a wide array, right? You got these, which are kind of, I'll call them like specialist marathoners who can contend when they're racing against like super segmented fields. But like Triumph for Terms is, in my eyes at least, undebatably like the top 2 elite marathoner, probably top 1 in the current meta. And then Triumph for Engagement is probably number 3, but I would say at least top 5 in that same category. So you have those, and then you have these, which is just would look like these two can't breed and should not be breeding together. So it is a wide range of outcomes. I think it's interesting to have this combination done over and over and over again. There's just not that many pairs in the game that have been done this often. So I know we're going to keep hitting them together as long as we can and continue to gather some data. But it is a good example of if we had started with these two, the minutes and what was it, months? Whatever.
Seconds and months, yeah.
Seconds and months. Can't keep up your time time names. But yeah,
if we make it any more confusing,
we probably would not have gone to a third, right? I mean, it's just
right.
Why would you? So it is a good data point, or 4 data points, just showing the variety of outcomes you can have.
And I think so. Here's Triumph for Engagement, just so everybody can see. So this was probably you said that this is probably the third best of the elite marathoners.
I think John the Horse it's very different than these two. But I mean, win equity, like John the Horse probably beats both of them in a harder field just because of the variance. But in terms of these horses that can contend in the elite tournaments, they're probably 1 and 2 for the elite marathoners. I'm sure some pop up always left and right, but at least by my last look, they were way up there. I mean, 2.13 profit in not that long of like a few months is huge. And then Engagement's newer, but I think it's 0.3 or 0.4 in a couple months is quite good.
Yeah. So I'm guessing these other two, if we run them more, which I am running Triumph for Months a little bit more. I don't know if you're going to run Triumph for Seconds. The elite tournament is today. You've got a couple more hours if you want to get Triumph for Seconds out there and get some more data. But I'm guessing it's going to look a little bit better than it does.
Yeah, the no flaming 7th really turned me off of expanding on this even more. But I should.
Well, this was today. I see.
Yeah.
Or yesterday. Yeah.
I'll probably try 26 here in a second.
Brutal. Yeah. Yeah. If this was the first one, we never would have gone back to it. This does not look good.
Right.
So yeah, keep it real, guys. I mean, this is the asymmetric upside that Kevin always refers to. You do a breed, you get this. This horse is relatively worthless. There's a little bit of breeding value. Maybe you can kick out crosses and pull some of this lineage, because Triumph for Mali does come from Triumph for Hours, and Blue Bullet does come from Terms of Engagement. So I think that there's an argument that's why Triumph for Terms is so good. It pulled
Terms looks just like Engagement, like Terms of Engagement. So Triumph for Terms looks just like Terms of Engagement, just like slightly worse, but it flames in a lot of C1 page and just dominates the free field. So it's very clear where that pull came from. Speaking of like grandparent or great grandparent roles.
And these two horses here, because we've only bred it out one cycle, there's a third one. Know Your Horses isn't pulling it, but Triumph for Saber is awesome and won that cross marathon tournament the other night. It's already got 0.28 and it's only less than a month old now. So it had a really good run in the Lucky Maiden 5. And then Archibald bred this General Trumpet, and that was in the grand final of Lucky Maiden 5, and I think it placed. So this one's a really nice cross too. So that goes to show you, I mean, that's the asymmetric upside. Not only do you have a horse here that has 2.1 ETH in profit, but now you're able to breed that out and create some of the best crosses in the game, which is just, you know, a total winning lottery ticket, like you said. But then if somebody had paid us 1 ETH to pry one of these offspring away from this pair of Triumph for Mali and Blue Bullet, they would have been sorely disappointed. So that's why the prices are where they're at, because you can land a Triumph for terms, and that, you know, that package of that horse and its offspring is just so valuable right now in the current environment. But then you can lose essentially your whole investment with a horse like Triumph for Seconds, right?
Yeah, I think that's why it's important. Like bankroll management is huge in terms of just breeding and spending this much on a single bullet, as no pun intended with Blue Bullet. But I think with that, it's almost better for us to just like run it. We'll take the risk, and then we can sell it and just get a more fair value, because paying 0.7 or 1 ETH for that, one of the parties is going to be disappointed probably at some point. So that's just kind of an interesting dynamic with the UUU space. But yeah, high risk, high reward. As long as the buyer understands what they're getting into and they can afford losing it, then it's all fine. It's fun to gamble.
Yeah, I love what you said there about a lot of the time it makes more sense for us to just breed it ourselves and see what comes out, because we'd rather take that risk than have somebody else pay this outrageous price. And we're not trying to twist anybody's arm when you put in a request for one of these top tier horses, but it's not worth it for us to give it up. And we don't want you to be upset with us or have a bad experience with the game if you're working with like your entire budget for something like that. So I think it's normal for like human nature to just want to get your money into the game and play like that, which is totally fine if you've got that kind of disposable income, you know, not financial advice. But if you're working with your whole budget, you know, make some wise decisions that aren't going to hurt you.
That's right. That's right. And I mean, it's not like we put our money where our mouth is there. If we're turning down a price, we're going to be the ones taking it in house. So it's really, we're not playing games with this. It's a legit scenario where we're just going to take it in house if we don't sell it.
Right. Exactly. All right. I think that's a good spot to wrap it up for this week, Kevin. Huh?
Thanks. So thanks for having me as always.
Thanks for having me. You guys put a comment into the replies section or whatever they call it on YouTube with your public wallet address. We're going to raffle off those tokens for Lucky Jack's events. So you'll get a shot at getting into the Lucky Brawl and also the Goblin Rush. I'm going to have to make a list of the names of these events. He's doing another one that we didn't even get a chance to talk about. It's called the Knockout or something like that, but maybe we'll put the link to that in there too. Mm-hmm. Go follow Lucky Jack out on Twitter. I don't have his Twitter handle, but you'll find him if you're following Zed people. Follow Lucky Jack. Follow Kevin at Arbitrage.Run. Follow me at Zed Diamond Hands. Subscribe to the show. Give us a like. Come find us on Arbitrage.Run. You can put in a request for a breed with any of our studs, any of our females, build a breed. We're going to have that historical pricing that I continue to promise. We're doing some work on the back end to be able to get that to you accurately and transparently. But until next time, Kevin, have a good one, brother.
See you.